the last movement, the Aeterna, where everything is resolved in light and peace and the hope of redemption. I didn't start with that text, the Latin text. I've prefaced it with the English words from the 1611 Bible, saying, I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. It's from the book of Revelation, and I'm afraid to say that I actually misquoted the voice from heaven, because it didn't say, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. It said, right from henceforth, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. And in case anybody's wondering if there's any theological significance in that, the answer is no. I just simply forgot. I was writing without a Bible by me, and I just left those bits out. And having left it out, I couldn't then change the music to make it fit. So I'm afraid it's an incomplete biblical quotation. And the soprano soloist introduces this thought. Can be sung a little more operatically than the Pie Jesu. It's quite hard to find one soprano who is at home with the style of both these movements. I mean, basically it needs a lyric soprano, or it can be done by a boy soprano. But of course it goes up to a top B flat in the solo part. And that's the last thing that he or she sings from their labours, right up to B flat there. And that happened purely because when I was working frantically at the last minute in Sacramento to finish the incomplete work with the 4 movements in the form it was going to be done, I discovered that in the choir there was a wonderful soprano who had been a professional working with the great Robert Shaw, and she had an absolutely lovely top B flat. I forget what the piece was that revealed that to me, but I thought I've absolutely got to write a top B flat in because she's going to sing it so beautifully. Very practical consideration indeed, but that was how that happened. So we start with this revelation, as it were, moving then into the official Latin text. Lux aeterna luceat eis, may light perpetual shine upon them. Now, this is a quotation from the Gregorian chant that is set in the Mass for the Dead. And the only bit I've used are the very first few notes. Lux aeterna. And I didn't use any more than that, but I've just stretched it out very, very slowly, and that is really the theme of the final section, where it's almost as if time is suspended, the movement is slow, there are triplets going ya da da dee da da dee da da dee on the harp, and I guess the influence behind this music is probably Mahler. Interesting, he never wrote a Requiem, and I don't know whether he'd have approved of this, but I think it's almost the world of the Adagietto from the Mahler Fifth Symphony. Not, I think, something that I was conscious of when I wrote the piece, but that's probably the world it inhabits. And this really brings us to a very peaceful close, and the theme of the opening returns, but slowed down because it's a recollection. One of the things that conductors sometimes do wrong with this piece is to speed up when we get the opening theme from Movement 1 returning, and that's not supposed to happen. It is meant to be slower than it was because everything has changed. We've been through the whole experience. We've travelled this journey, and we've ultimately arrived at eternal peace and eternal light. And that was the statement I wanted to make. And it's odd that, given that the work had such patchwork origins, that it does actually in any sense fit together. I hope perhaps it does. I hope that in some sense it will touch people's hearts. It's got nothing at all to do with the style of contemporary concert music. Anybody who is a contemporary music follower would say, well, this could have been written 100 years ago. And what I think I'd say to that is, well, first, that the text of the Requiem is so timeless that I don't think there's any need for the music to necessarily be absolutely of any one particular period. And so I felt free to just use whatever styles and ideas, going right back to Gregorian chant of 1,000 years ago, and to incorporate them into the statement that I wanted to make. And I think the other thing is that although you might say, if you look at any 8 bars of this piece, that they could have been written, well, perhaps not quite 100 years ago, but certainly some while ago. If you take it as a whole, I don't think it could have been written any time other than the 1980s. And in using different styles and ideas, I've tried to pull together. It's like Mahler said about the symphony. He said a symphony should encompass a whole world. And the references, the influences that were brought to bear when I wrote this music were ones which have come from all different times and places. There's Bach, there's Fauré, there's Herbert Howells I've mentioned, there's Mahler. There are probably others that people could point to. But in the end, it was the work that I wanted to write. I only expected one performance, and I must count myself very, very fortunate that as of now, when I speak here in the year 2010, it's had a lot more than just one.